Okay, so Anna, so thanks for joining in the panel discussion. I hope it's okay that we can fire off a couple of questions and steering a bit your conversation, and because there are so many things going on in, and I would say in the area of NGOs. So maybe in general, what in your opinion, Erna, what were the challenges of your NGO in the previous years, so pre-pandemic, so to say, and what triggered your NGO to undertake a digital transformation?
Yeah, so the structure of the NGO underwent transformation. We were a Dutch-based NGO, and we paid funds to implementing organizations in other countries. And we turned it around to a global NGO with locations in more than 30 countries. If you want to run an organization, you need to have consistent management information. So it became clear soon that all those organizations already existed. They were previous partners, or we just started new organizations. But it became really clear that we all needed to work in an integrated system to have an overview. So that's what we started to do.
Okay, thank you very much. And Desiree, how was that for Crop Trust pre-pandemic, so to say?
Okay. Well, I guess in our case, it was somewhat different. Unlike Anna, we don't have multiple organizations. We only have one, one office, so to speak. So we're only our head office, we don't have any subsidiaries. So we're based here in Bonn. But before we went to the new system, we use a number of different systems and different processes to manage various things, which result in a lot of duplication of information and all this kind of stuff. So we wanted to basically improve the way in which we work, and also, the way in which information is stored and stuff like that. And because the organizations start relatively small and then slowly start to grow, and as that started, then obviously, certain things, we use a number of different things, which also include a number of different systems. So we got to a point where it was time to sort of merge things together. And as part of that process for us, we thought by approaching it by looking at, okay, we want to look at the organization as a whole and look at how we can digitalize that to make it more efficient in terms of how we work and how we share things. Because even though we have one office and we're only based in one location, because we work with partners internationally, a lot of our teams, especially the science half of our team, spend a lot of time on the way, visiting partners, working with partners, and need to be able to work from various different locations. So it's also always very important that they can access our system, not just from in-house, but from outside easily without the VPN and all the rest of things that you need to go through to get access when you're using various different systems. That if we have an integrated combined one system, and make that life a bit easier, mainly for those individuals, but also just for us working together.
Okay, thank you. And maybe back to Erna. So looking at the initiatives that were taken a couple of years ago, was this done from, let's say, a clear strategic point of view? So with strategic decisions made, or was it kind of evolving from a local or a lower level organizational initiative that kind of got bigger and bigger? So how did it work out for Soliaridad?
I think it was a strategic decision. It was a strategic decision first to start using Salesforce, the Salesforce platform. And then after that, it was a strategic decision to start using Financial Force. And okay. I think that we found out about this app because we were on the Salesforce platform. But it was top down and also implemented top down, and it was implemented with a big bang, you could say. So we went live all at once. And I think that if you ask me, like, what would you do different? I would cascade. So I would start small. That would be a thing that we would do differently.
But was it in that sense? So you already give, let's say, a takeaway, which is great. So breaking it down into smaller bits and pieces. But was it also because that, let's say, from that strategic decision made, that they did not foresee that it would become a multi-year program with multi underlying projects, so to say? Was it, let's say, underestimated then?
The implementation was underestimated, and what it means for an organization was underestimated. That's what I think. And we are in so many countries, and each country has its own characteristics, its own legislation, laws. So you really have to think it through and continue to support staff in the countries. So yeah, that was important. And then as an NGO, you cannot set aside a lot of funds at once for these investments. I don't know if this ring recognizes that. And then so you have to if you can't, then you have to kind of take smaller steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And indeed, Desiree, are you recognizing the same?
Well, I mean, I think our approach was somewhat different, and I guess we don't have some of the complexity that Herder's face in terms of with having the multiple location and all the country complexities. But our approach was somewhat different, was also strategic. But what we did was even before we got to Financial Force, basically, we started a project, and the whole objective of the project was to look at how do we best go about digitalizing the organization. So before we get to systems and all those, we had, someone taking a look at how we work, all the different systems we use and all these kind of things, and then do an assessment and then come up with some proposed solution for management to consider. And it's through that process that we got to Financial Force. So because it was not just about our financial system alone for us. It was about all the other different systems that we use. We wanted something that we can combine, not just the finance, but the other areas. And as part of that process, there was a number of different things that we're using now that we didn't have before, such as Box and various other things that can link and feed into Salesforce and Financial Force. All of those came out of that project. So the project overall was to look at what we had, how we work, what we're using, and then look at how we can combine those and then make recommendation on what are the possible systems or options that, are suitable for us. And then from there, management made a decision. We went through tender processes and all that in terms of looking at different systems and assessing those before we arrived at Financial Force, which we're now using. So that for us, I think, worked really well. But there are other things that Aaron mentioned, such as budget and stuff like those. But there's two parts to that, right? Because in the olden days or prior to the digital system, most system like these, you tend to, or a small organization, look at what you can buy from the shelves. And in those days, you could buy something and it's yours for however period of long. You only have to have supports and stuff like those. Whereas now it's all about licenses. So you don't buy something you own anymore. You're paying a certain amount for licenses. So not only do you have to plan for the cost of a possible implementation of a new system, but you also need to consider the cost of paying for the license over time, right? So you need not just a budget up front now, but you need to make sure that you have enough budget so that you can continue to pay the licenses, because it's not like before where you had a system and it's yours, and okay, if you can't pay the support, you can still use the system. It doesn't work like that anymore, right?
Yeah.
If you can't pay the license, then you don't have a system, and it's terrible. So, and I think maybe not the bigger NGOs, but the smaller NGOs, that's a really important point, that they really need to make sure that it's considered. So, it's really important to do the work up front and look at, which system is right for me. And as part of that process is also to make sure you understand the costing of that. Because, it's not just the upfront cost in terms of implementing, but nowadays, and I think it's almost irrelevant which system you go with, they're all license based now. So, you have to make sure you have the budget to maintain that over time.
Yes. But is then, I think this is a very, let's say, critical remark that you make. So the shift to the cloud is not only because it's nice that it is coming out of the cloud. In essence, and I think that was the whole purpose behind it, should also lower your total cost of ownership, because you don't need to maintain a very costly infrastructure like we had to do in the past, because that's all kind of incorporated in the license cost. So for your monthly subscriptions. But now the question indeed is then, do you see that it plays out, that you can see from an IT spend perspective that your TCO is going down with not having any more an expensive infrastructure to maintain?
Well, maybe from an accounting point of view, depends on how you look at it, right? Because in the past, okay, you buy a piece of equipment or software or something, it's yours. You depreciate, depends on how much it costs, whether you depreciate it over time, as opposed to, and then depends also how long you can actually use that thing in terms of what the life is, as opposed to having to have a different kind of budget for, because I mean, you also got to think about NGO, depending on how they're funded, right? Some organization are dependent on voluntary contribution. Some maybe have a parent somewhere that give some contribution somewhere, and they're funding from different ways, depending again on the size and also what they do and where their money come from. So some might be able to fundraise for a big purchase of something, as in the old methodology, and people would be willing to, okay, you need to upgrade your system, blah blah blah, and you can make the case and get the funding, right? But now it's a different model, right? So you make the case, you get the funding, people might be likely to give you funding year 1 or year 2, but then after that it's kind of dropped off, right? And in this new model, you have to make sure that you have funding for the long term. So this short-term funding no longer fit this model. And it's not always easy to raise fund in those cases where you don't have a constant source of income or your own generating income. So that's where it becomes an issue for a lot of NGO type organization. And that's why this point is so important.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that you will be able to fund it.
Okay. And is that for you the same, Erna, if you look at Solidaridad?
Sorry, just to say, I mean, for us, that's not quite the issue for us, because we plan this and we know, and we are able to finance. They're just saying that this is a very important thing for maybe some of the smaller NGO that might be considering this type of system, that they need to make sure that they look into when they're planning it.
Okay, so that's something that you could advise, and also for other NGOs to learn from Crop Trust how you were able to get this in place and manage this.
That it just they need to make sure that they fully understand the cost up front.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And how is it for you, Erna?
I think for us, we can calculate it in our projects in that sense. So we can charge it to projects. So in that sense, it might even be helpful. And the positive side is that it's all fee-based. So I think there's also some kind of a risk at the other side, the side of the supplier, because you can change easier. You can change from supplier. It's not that easy to change to a different system, but you can just disconnect and stop paying the licenses and change to another application.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think what it has also started is that you cooperate, that you work together with these organizations to improve your system. That's what I like about it. It's different than before. And before everything was static, and now it has become dynamic.
Okay.
And that's what I like about it.
And if you take this point and also then looking at the implementation that happened for Solidaridad, would you then say the effort to get it implemented, was it more, let's say, the effort in kind of assessing your processes and maybe changing your working processes? Or was it more to the point that you had to learn people how to use the new system?
Yeah, I think both. So what we noticed is that for a lot of people, and maybe especially in NGOs, because we work in all these different countries, that we noticed that for a lot of people, it is still difficult to work with an ERP system that gives that many possibilities. They're not always used to it, I would say. And what's your question?
So whether or not it was, let's say, more from the process point of view, that based on a new technology, you can optimize your processes, you can digitize your processes. In that sense, it was yes or no an effort, or was it more that people needed to learn a new system and that was for you the effort?
Yeah, and then so that's the thing. People need to learn how the system works. Very, very different. ERP and really everything is connected to each other. And you need to have your. So it also evokes questions and ways of working, and you need to align and improve and clarify how you work together. So it's a bit of both, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe back to Desiree, if you look at the digital transformation that happened in that sense for Crop Trust, what is the biggest learning that you took out?
The biggest learning, I would say, I mean, there's a number of lessons learned, but I think one of the biggest learning is to make sure that everybody understands what it means, what you're actually approaching when you're looking at implementing a new system, right? Because, I think different people have different understanding depending on whether or not you've been involved in one before or this is your first. But the time required and the dedication that is required to implement a new system is quite big. And, there's a number of different elements to it, apart from just the work in implementing the system itself, in terms of the planning upfront, the change management that you need to make sure is happening, the communication throughout the organization that you need to make sure is happening, not just management being aware, but everybody else being aware of what's happening, what's coming, and those kind of things. So that, this constant communication, I think, will also help the process, because people are more likely to be open to something when they feel that they're involved, right? So I think, that's been very good and that works to some, and I think, in our case, I mean, we're still relatively new because we pretty much implement this in 2020 towards the end. And so we're like in our bedding in year now, you could call it that. So there's still a lot to learn from our side. We're still learning as we go. We were lucky in one sense that we had Corona because, without that, slowing down of certain things for us, it would have been a lot more challenging to implement than it actually was, because it happened in 2020 when a lot of things slowed down for us. One of the main thing was like travel, which is a big part of what we do because of working with international people all over the world and the amount of travel involved, and because travel was stopped pretty much. So that gave us a lot more space and capacity to actually implement, because I think we cannot underestimate the amount of time it required to actually really implement the new system, because it's not just about taking data from one, transfer it to another and all that. And even just the data cleansing itself is a huge piece of work. So, just need to make sure that it needs to be planned and timed correctly to make sure that the individual that needs to be involved have the time and space to actually dedicate to that process to make sure that it's done properly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Desiree. And maybe back to Emma, and also looking at the time that we can spend, let's say, the remaining couple of minutes, if that's okay. Just let's say, if you look at, let's say, the Soliaridad, you took off with the digital transformation earlier, let's say pre-pandemic. In your opinion, did it help Solidaridad to overcome, let's say, the pandemic, or was that not a visible impact?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. We were able to invest a lot of time in this system during the pandemic, but I don't think it helped us to overcome, in that sense, the pandemic.
And is it because it is not, let's say, full scale and worldwide implemented at Solidaridad?
No, but what do you need during the pandemic? Yeah, you need to understand. You need more of what you always need. You need to immediately understand where you are financially and with your projects as an organization. But we were aware, so I don't really see a direct link, other than that we were, as Desireen also says, we were able to invest a lot of time in our processes and in the system. And I think it's a journey. We've implemented it a few years ago, and we're still improving. And there's always new items, new things to learn. There is always something to improve. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for this. Is there, let's say, a final takeaway that you would like to give back to the NGO audience?
With regards to what?
Well, if regards, let's say, to your experience so far, and also, let's say, being part of a digital transformation, but also being part of the change itself.
Yeah.
So in that sense, maybe you are ahead of multiple other NGOs. So is there something you would say, well, this is a very important takeaway that you would like to give?
What I see is the only way forward. And my aim is that we don't make a profit, or we do make a profit, but we spend it on our objectives. But we are not profit oriented. So what most organizations steer on is not relevant for us. So we steer on KPIs, we monitor our projects. And for me, kind of the end game is to make the connection between the effectiveness of the organization and the finances of the organization. And I think that this is the only way that any organization can go, and especially NGOs. You have to digitize and you have to become data oriented.
Okay, thank you very much. And Desireen, is there?
I agree. I think that's the way everything is going nowadays, and everyone needs to digitize. So they need to start thinking about it if they haven't already. And also, I think it's very important that they plan it wisely. I think that's very important. I think that the planning before they start is crucial, because if you don't plan properly, there will be a lot of pitfalls, and you'll spend a lot of time catching up on things that, if you plan, you can avoid upfront. So from me, takeaway is do your homework, investigate and plan properly. Make sure you have the relevant budget that's available. If you don't have the fund, at least figure out how it's going to be funded before you actually make the decision to go. And depending on the partner you choose to work with, I would say, try and get as much information up front as you can. Understand from the partner, or they all of expert in relevant areas who need to get some understanding of your business, what you do, and then see how they can help you to implement it, because there are different options out there, and it's good to do your homework before you start.
Okay. Well, I think we learned already in this, let's say, quick half an hour already a couple of very appealing insights. So I hope this will help others. We will share, let's say, the recordings as well, but also let's not consider this as a one-off, and continue the journey together in further building up, I think, a good relationship network, so that indeed other NGOs, maybe small NGOs, will not step in the same pitfalls as you might have experienced or have seen. So avoiding those risks. Okay. Then I would like to say thank you very much for joining this short panel discussion in a digital format, also different than normally. And I will we'll see you again soon. Desiree, maybe I have the opportunity to come over to your office as well. Now we can start traveling again. But again, thank you very much for taking the time and hopefully having inspired others.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So for everyone in this session now will be closed, and you can open the next session, which is then a short demonstration of the system itself.